Good morning, everybody. I'm 72 the Architect, aka Jason B. And today on my Stoic Circus, we're going to talk about, are you playing too much? That's right. Are you playing too much with your abilities, your choices, your time? We're going to go over why the Stoics believe that, a good level of philosophy can pull you and your resources and your interests all into yourself, making a great outcome. So stay tuned here in just a minute as we get started on my Stoic Circus. All right, everybody. Good morning, whatever it is. Good, maybe good afternoon or good evening, just like they would say on the Truman Show. You know that movie that Jim Carrey played such a good part in. Today, we're going to talk about: are you playing too much? That's right. Are you playing too much with your choices? And after reading a little bit of Seneca from his moral letters, he basically kind of laid out a few things that were very, very important to me. And there was a Stoic question from the Daily Stoic that says, how can I share this philosophy that helped me so much? Right? That's the question. But to understand the question, you've got to add some context of where the question came from. Now, Seneca wrote this in his book, Moral Letters. He's basically said that some people with exceptional minds quickly grasp on virtue or produce it within themselves, but others, dim and lazy types, hindered by bad habits and must have their rusty souls constantly scrubbed down. The weaker sorts will be helped and lifted from their bad opinions if we put them in the care of philosophy principles. Now, what does that mean? That basically means that the structure in which you're going to put yourself in, that means that when you want to become a better person from where you're actually at, that you've got to understand a few of the variables. You've got to understand quite a few things that when we look at, if you really want to better your station in life, what is the game that you're going to have to play? What's the outcome? Just like I was talking to a good friend of mine who happens to be a writer and also a publicist. We were talking about the principles in which, do you imagine the end game first? That's right. What is the real position or role you want to be in? What kind of decisions do you want to make? There's constant references in a lot of books like Ask and It's Given by Jerry and Esther Hicks. They talk about the laws of attraction, right? And I'm not getting out of the context of philosophy because it all mixes in. Now, when we understand what actually is taking place and what things are doing and working for us, we also have to understand that going from the beginning to the top is a cycle. You will reach a pinnacle in certain points and leverages, right? But when you get to that point, don't get too comfortable. Be in the ability to go back to being the learner. You're going to be in leadership. As I was talking to another individual, I was talking to a friend of mine in Clubhouse, which I'm also producing live in. Um, he asked me a question about leadership, and I said, there comes a plateau that every leader must face. You eventually face that cycle. Either you're relevant for the time being, you're there for a reason, or you're only there for a season. And that kind of points out, like, especially what's going on in the United States currently. We're getting ready to go into election season. It's 2023. It's the wrap up. People are starting to put money into campaigns, start to beg for your attention, scratch your attention. What are the chain of events? But see, the Stoics would always tell you that you must be always, always, always self reliant and self resilient. And why is that so important? They basically said that when they train their thoughts for a progress, for a living, that it's not permanent. Because why? We as human beings, we do expire at some point, we do die. We can't take land with us. We can't take any of our possessions. We die and we leave a legacy. So, what is it that makes the situation really important? Now, some people will play immaturely for a long period of time and eventually they will grow up. Others don't. Some people complain about how their station in life is what's handed to them and only they can do good with the variables that's handed to them and that someone else should have to pay, right? And I think that's kind of interesting because it's in the self mindset of a trap. It is a place where they cannot grow or cannot thrive because they're not seeking. They feel like, well, I'm in my sandbox. I don't want to get out of it. Well, granted, I understand that. And it's very important. But then there's a point of life where if you don't make decisions to change and seek to improve, to challenge yourself, that eventually relevancy will show up at your door. Hello, I'm coming for you. Oh, the thing that you're doing right now, it's not relevant anymore. I can't pay you for it. But wait a minute. This is what I've done. This is my life's work. Why would you tell me I have to change? Well, you've played too much in mediocrity. We've told you through your teachings, but you didn't get it. So guess what? Now we're going to put you in the position, we're going to kick you out of your role and your status, and you're going to have to go back to work again. Now, who wants to do that, right? But it happens to us all. There is some point that when you hit that rock bottom and you understand, I can't go forward with the way that I'm living. Same goes for our maturity. You know, I'm not going to stay the same way I was decision making at the age of 30. I mean, I have the ability, but what can I take from the ability that I have now and elevate myself? And that's really what Seneca was talking about. He was saying, if you're exceptionally in the mind and you grasp what is at play, what is at stake, that you're to produce within yourself, you produce within yourself to give and receive exchanges, right? Give and take. And so when we look at, hey, I share my philosophy in light of someone be able to take my thought and grow from it and go forward as I've grown from someone else's. But in this day and age, we constantly deliberate, we constantly argue in the which ways that who is the best. Let me grow my monopoly. And that's why in history, if you've noticed, every great empire has fallen. Rome fell, Genghis Khan fell, the Ming Dynasty fell, Alexander the Great fell. But what was left over? Even the ancient Egyptians, as well as the Aztecs, the Mayas, you can go around the world and you will see examples that they reached amazing heights, but they all fell. Even the Tower of Babel, it fell. And we look at what's actually in our attention and in our control. So I've heard a lot of conversations, just even think about the current events of right now. I've seen lots of things through TikTok and Instagram, the news of all the events and the chain of events that are going on in the Middle East, specifically in Israel, or what they're doing, how they're justifying their wars. And just like I was talking to some fellow colleagues on both sides, on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side, you both got help from somebody else to fight your fight. And when you give your self-interest to get aid, to persuade, or to win the battle, there is a consequence for all this. Precious life has been lost. Things and people wonder why that things have not changed. People are not seeing each other as human beings anymore. But why? It's because of how they design their self-interest, right? And give me just a second here. I've got a friend of mine over on Clubhouse. Good morning, Marcella. I'm producing live on YouTube as well as Clubhouse. And so we're kind of
Good
talking
morning,
about
Jason.
good morning. We're kind of talking about, are you playing too much, period. Whether your time, your energy, or your intelligence, your intention, are you playing way too much? Or are you taking with it and maximizing? Though that was really the premise of what I've been talking about today. And I quoted a Stoic philosopher who says, hey, some people grasp, right where they're at and they grow. And some people they just fester in their bad habits and they don't grow and they're forced to move on. So that's kind of like where I'm at and where I'm talking. So when I look at all these things and I look at the chain of events of where the world is at, and then I look at where I'm at, I'm a man, I'm a father, I'm a partner to somebody. How do those chain of events affect me? They can. But if I stop funding my attention and I focus on the outcomes, I'm not playing with my time. If they need my time and my attention eventually in the masses to fund their causes on either side. And if we stop funding these people or companies or religious institutions that make decisions in the masses, we stop having these in the long term, having these problems. But as long as we constantly deliberate what is worth it to me. Have you ever said, to a friend, hey, this isn't worth my time, or I don't have time for this? Really, that's a big staple that is constantly said. But then you ask them, okay, I'm curious, not for maybe my matter. Let me actually sit down and be interested in you for about 5 minutes. And I'm going to take that 5 minutes. What is important to you? And the most common reaction is, well, well, my family, of course, and this and that. And I said, okay, great. So, and then they deliberate whatever their explanation is. Most of the time, it's, trying to get a better career, making more money. And then when I ask them the serious question, what have you done with what you've been given and blessed and worked with? Do you save more? Are you spending less? I mean, because I can remember my first job, I was paid $4.25 an hour. And that was, God, I'm 51 now. So 14. Let's just say it's a great deal of sum of time because I'm not a mathematician in my head right away. But looking at what I do now and how I make money, that's a big, stark jump. I had to rely on learning from other people and deliberate. But I also, let's just say, I got myself into some luxuries and I got into debt for those things. And what leverages for paying for those are going to weigh against me, like anybody. So when you constantly worry about what your neighbor's doing, you're counting change in their pockets, but never really fortifying what's in your own purse. So what does that really mean to us all? How and it's kind of like what Seneca was saying, the weaker sorts will be helped and lifted from their bad opinions if we put them in the care of philosophy's principles. And what are those? Well, the Stoic philosophers have four specific principles. One is wisdom. Wisdom is developed through knowledge and experience over time. Two, temperance. What does that mean? That means being able to take maturity and patience and have it work with you and then what you understand, what you know, and what you can develop. Justice. What does that mean? That even if the decision works against your cause, that you understand that the principles of give and take are there, right? We can't forget that how justice is blind, allegedly, but we don't see reason for it. And when it's administered, when it comes out, there's times it works in our favors, not in our favors, and there's the in between. But we feel like we've got to attach to some kind of fairness. And the fourth most important point of the Stoic virtues is courage. That means you're willing to take the risk. You're willing to get out of your sandbox, to get out of your own comfortability. Because just like I was saying in the beginning of the show, in the beginning, it's about not just staying comfortable, that you are going to have to grow because what you're relevantly doing now, let's say in 5 years, may not be so relevant and you can't exchange with people. It's how we stay stagnant in our beliefs. And when we stay stagnant in our beliefs, we don't grow as people, we don't grow as parents or sons or daughters. And then the people that were in our charge, when we take, then they seek to elevate. So where do we really go with all this? And that's where growth mindset is really important. It means to be curious, to take the chance. Yeah, sometimes you got to say, maybe something's too risky at the moment, but always be willing to learn whether young or old. And I heard this thing not too long ago where a guy was saying, I'm 85 years old and I still learn from the 16-year-old, the 20-year-old, the 30-year-old, and I've already served my time, made a great sum of money. I wish they would take more time to learn from me. Now, isn't that an amazing, beautiful symbology that the young don't want to learn from the old? Why? I feel a lot of it is stagnant energy. I feel like it's stagnant positioning. I feel that, and I understand that even as I'm getting older, will my kids learn from my hard work or just be beneficiaries and saying, ah, thanks, Dad. See you later. Well, of course, initially they'll say, thanks, Dad. See you later. But they will come back more than likely if their resources are tapped. But it's how you build the loving relationship and encourage their growth. Just like, you know, someone I know, their son is really mad at their dad and he's hating him, right? And I said, okay, well, that's interesting. And I said, but that's a stage. And eventually they will grow from that. And when they're stopped being mad and let that fuel just grow and fester in them, then comes a pivot. Did you grow? Did you stay? Or you just want to ignore? And then what about when you're put in that position? That's what we really have to understand. My parents had not a lot of resources, but I grew from their resources, and I owe a debt of gratitude, whether how much they were, influenced in my life or not. I owe them. I would not be here without them, and I cannot forget that. So as we go out throughout the week on Monday, think about where you are now, where you're growing, and where you're curious. Marcello, do you have any thoughts? I know you kind of walked in, and I always appreciate your time. I know I've made content with you over on the Wisdom app. What are your thoughts on basically what I've been talking about?
Hey, well, it's okay. So it's really funny that I walked in on this because I've been having this conversation with some of my students, and a lot of them really just are in a position right now or in a place in their growth where they just want to talk about what's happening with them. And I asked them, why are we talking about this? Why are you not putting these things into action?
Mm,
Yeah. And then I noticed that they're talking about it with other people, and I say, do really people care? These people really care. Who are you telling your business to? Who are you sharing your thoughts and your growth with?
mhm,
I get it. Sometimes people need to feel validated, and I said, but why? Why are you going and talking about this and expecting validation from everyone around you when you're just going to need to sit with yourself? Validation comes from within you.
mhm.
So I won't say what they said. It's pretty private sessions.
Understood.
However, yeah, but like I said, I see it often. I see it, and it's not just them. I have other people. I find them in clubhouse rooms on wisdom, and telling their stories, and they want to tell all about all the stuff that they've done. And I say, you know what? I feel like you're thinking way too deeply on this. You're really just looking for someone to tell you what to do next. And if that's what you need, go find yourself a coach.
Mm,
But honestly, yeah, those are my strong feelings on constantly sharing these things. It's not like you're talking about this because you've been through it, Jason. I've been through it. We're constantly looking for the next level of improvement from ourselves, and a lot of the people that I interact with more recently are people who are still trying to find the doorway to that next level.
that's
So they're
interesting.
walking down that hallway.
I'm glad you talked about your students in such the way that where they want to brainstorm, be in a mastermind mindset and think that that's going to get them to the solution. And your reaction was, what action did you put in place to put your thoughts into living? It's one thing for like when, especially when people talk about manifestation as an example. Manifestation does not follow and fulfill unless there is action and work and practice. See, it's one thing to be directed towards an outcome, right? A goal, so to speak. And this is why the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius specifically says, keep your goals to yourself. because you don't want contradiction and contrast to deter you. And there's another book, Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, where he says that when you discuss your goals, when you discuss your thoughts, though they may be fluid and actually have some weight and inertia and energy to actually exist, the life constraints will constantly overt and divert you into shifting into other performances. And that's where your students miss the point. Like, hey, I'm glad that you're talking with about people. Are you making an impact to creating a launching pad to go forward? And what is that outcome? What is the outcome that you really want? Are you just talking for shits and giggles? Excuse my language. Are you just promoting it for to be admired? Talk is cheap. People are only interested when it appeals to their self-interest, which goes on to another book that I like referring to, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And Dale Carnegie interviewed Rockefeller, and he says, I'm not interested just in my outcomes, but when I'm interested in other people's outcomes that can further my own, now you have my time and attention. But if you don't have that, I meet you where you're at and I'm dismissive. I mean, he kind of explained it, and so to speak, I'm paraphrasing, but he was dismissive on the irrelevancy of squandering your time and energy. He only listened to the people that could get the outcomes that he desired, deliberating, launching, moving. And there comes a time in a season, and some people have to step aside outside of themselves. There's times where you got to go and walk and just do the work and just shut up. And you can't get past that. So I'm glad you mentioned that example. That was very impactful, you know. And go ahead.
No, thank you, thank you. Well, it okay. So, I because the program that I run is about inner child healing, I speak to them as though they're children, and
Mm,
it's not condescending at all. It's we all want to connect with our inner child, but everyone is here writing these long letters with these, oh, like pouring their heart out. And I said, do you really think a child is going to understand what you're saying? Not all children come from that vein. Lots of children just want to be loved. And you writing this long letter, you're writing it for yourself. You're not writing for your inner child.
mm-hmm,
Write to that inner child. Do you know what I say to my inner child every day? Everything is okay. Children need to be comforted.
mm-hmm.
And when you're writing them, oh, you did this and you did that, and I love you and you're protected. Okay, why? Speak to the child like it is a child. That's where people fall short and they think they're healing that child. They're not. They're once again forcing that child to grow up too quickly.
Yeah. You know what? And it's interesting you say that because I've done my own inner work, shadow, light, whatever you want to call it. And I have grown, I'm not trying to tout, but I have grown so much to where I understand I can be a better father to my children. I understand that no matter what happens from here on out, the legacy I now can live is with a clearer conscience. And in that inner child work it's like layaways. You lay it away too long. The interest on it is costing you in your life stress, beliefs, bad sleep, bad diet, bad relationships, personal values, mantras that don't work from you, position and roles you serve in business that do not work. And when you ask these people that are doing, it's like they've rehearsed their deductive reasoning. They've rehearsed the reason why they are continually suffering. And you, as the parent, kind of got to say, well, you know, I'm not going to stroke your ego, but just going to tell you, leave it alone. Stop it. Stop it. What have you learned along the way? Is the past really relevant to right now? Like I look, so many people have tried to drag me into the political discussions about what's going on, like in the current events. And I just simply say, okay, these people have been fighting on both sides and they know their history. They know what travesties took place, right? But without my attention or my dollar, my tax dollars, and the influence I have on people, can they fight their fight? A small little region, a small region in the world is fought so heavily over, and you can't take it to your death. You don't get to take anything in your death. You really don't. Your soul expires. You go up. People are fighting over one small stretch of land, but what that land represents in their beliefs and what they'll do in light of their beliefs to be justified. Well, on this side in the 1940s, they illegally created a country. And on then this side, you know, you took more than you could, but with you took money from somebody else. You both did, and now you're at a pinnacle where you are two brats in a playground. And you're asking people to side with you. You're asking grown adults to become children like you and facilitate what? And so the rational person is like, you know what? Epictetus said, hey, grasp on the exceptional part. Build your virtue to not get stuck, right? Don't get stuck on where you're at. Let's move on. And how do we and somebody says you're so and people I've been called anti-Semitic, I've been called insensitive, I I've been called all kinds of bad names, right? And I'm like, because I don't side with you and I don't want to fund you with my thoughts or my process, I'm impartial. How can you be impartial? I can be impartial because I'm not funding your fight. It's like when I got in a fight in the playground. If it's me against one other guy, bigger or small, it doesn't matter. That's my fight, nobody else's. But we do this all the time with our attention. We do this with our inner child. Our inner child is like screaming like a little brat saying, ah. When are you going to be the adult to step up and saying, you've hurt me now? Someone hurt you then, but you're hurting me now. I don't understand you anymore. And then when you begin to rise up and you elevate your energy, you elevate who you are and what you do, that screaming little brat in you can't exist. He has to, the inner child work, what I will tell people, has to sit down because eventually just say, you know what, the fight is no longer relevant. The fight, no matter where it is in the world, no matter whether it's your spouse, your kids, your coworkers, the fight doesn't matter because progress keeps going on, whether you like it or not. And if you understand that, when you make a clear point choice to say, I'm going to elevate myself by learning from the resources that I have and don't have, and I'm going to constantly learn from people to make life a better place. That's really where it's at. And that's tough for a lot of us to swallow. But like I said, people retrain their traumas constantly. They train their obstacles. They make the obstacle bigger than it needs to be. I've been one of those people. I've told my bad story to so many. And when we think about what actually has taken place, you I'm sure and good morning, Julie, good friend of mine is on stage with me on Clubhouse. Thank you for coming in. Um, no matter what you do, you can't escape the consequences of what has existed. You can't change what has happened. What you can change and improve on is what you decide on now. Even say, like, if you use sarcasm as your entry point into getting people's attention, right? Or you use casual humor, or you'll tell a bad story. You'll be an Eeyore, so to speak. Well, today's Monday. It's a horrible day. Okay, Christopher Robbins, I'm sorry I don't have energy because I don't have coffee. And then you got Rabbit who's constantly saying,
What? What do you mean you're talking? You don't have no. Look at me. I'm having to raise kids. Come on now. Just don't be stuck in there.
and then your intelligent self, your emotional self says, wait, I don't need either one of you to be too down or too high and complain. I need someone who is going to be on the level. and you got to build your tribe. So good morning, Julie. How you doing? Producing live on YouTube and Clubhouse. And have you ever
Good morning.
Good morning. Have you come across a situation where you knew your inner child, so to speak, was coming out and playing too much with your time and attention? There's a fair question.
That is a fair question. Thank you, Jason. And hello, Marcella, who is sitting next to me in Clubhouse.
Good morning, Julie.
I do see my inner child come out wasting a lot of time, especially when I'm telling myself I'm just too much. Like I go over the top. People tell me to, simmer down, not be as enthusiastic as I am. And I get it. It's like sometimes really, really a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then I waste time like thinking about it, rethinking about it, da-da-da. So there you go.
And
thank you.
I'm going to create a follow-up. So when you understand you're wasting time, do you stop wasting your time and energy? Do you judge yourself? Or do you say, you know what? I get it. Yep, that sucked. Whatever it is, we're going to move forward now. How do you handle once you understand you've wasted?
I redirect, but it all depends on what's going on in my real life. Am I getting enough sleep? Am I taking care of myself? Am I overwhelmed with my kids? Usually when I am at an equilibrium, it doesn't hit me. I can get over it really quickly. I'm like, okay, well, I am who I am and I know it works for me. So it all depends if I'm really taking care of me.
Right. And that's the thing. When you get to a point, it's like, if I don't let go of this, I'm going to get wound up and I'm going to go further down the rabbit hole than which I don't belong.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a constant reminder. And what I will tell people, I'm going to be wrapping part of this session and keep the talk going on Clubhouse going. But for YouTube purpose, I'm going to be ending with this is my moral story for the end, for this part of the discussion for YouTube and the viewers on that, is that when you understand a sense of maturity, that it is a pivot for yourself, nobody else, yourself first. If your inner child is getting in the way, then you've got to be the bad parent, give them a spanking, have them sit down and say, be quiet. It's time for me to rise up. And there are choices and consequences for that, but we just have to understand that the title of this episode for YouTube is, Are You Playing Too Much? It just comes down to just do the hard work. That's just it. The hard work reveals the maturity. The hard work reveals how you can make a better decision for yourself. Anyhow, I'm going to be bringing this part of the show to a close, and I'll be continuing the discussion over on Clubhouse. So if you're following me on Clubhouse, go check me out at 72 The Architect, and My Stoic Circus is the house. And we are here on Mondays and Saturdays normally. So y'all take care, and we're just taking a brief pause.